Hey everyone, this is the Custoda Aaron here again in another video training on Prism with Master Detail. So last time we kind of left, we had a very basic application running, and but it was basically we could get a master up, we showed a detail, but we really didn't have any data, we didn't have any events, or any of those kind of things. So today we're going to start working on building up that app, and we're going to do some refactoring in Prism. In Xamarin Forms. I'm going to show you how to refactor some of our classes that we named to rename them and stuff. And the reason for that is I want to show you what happens when you start doing that, when you start renaming, and how to rename in Xamarin Studio, because it's a little bit different than Visual Studio. At least you have to know where you're doing it in order to get the maximum return. You still got to play around with things a little bit, but you can rename just about anything you have in there. You just have to know how to do it. So hopefully by the end of this video, we're going to go through and have a ability to have some data show up in our master. That's not just a blue screen or a red screen. We'll actually have real data inside of a table view, or excuse me, in a list view in here. In iOS, that'd be a table view, but in Xamarin Forms, we're in a list view. And when we click on that, we'll send an event over to our detail and have it draw some stuff. And that sounds wonderful. Now, I did change out the format of the training a little bit. You want to go out to GitHub, and I'll actually have the magical link up here to the project. And you want to, I'm going to have two folders from now on, a start and a finish folder. And you're going to want to start your code from the start folder. So I'm going to start giving you some free files that I don't want you to have to go through and add in yourself. So you can see here I'm in video 4 right now. So you would basically download the entire training session from GitHub, and you're going to go in and you're going to go find the video 4, find the start folder, go into the Xamarin Forms Master Detail Training, close the packages folder. You're going to find the solution file inside of here and open it up from here. So that's what I currently have open right here. That's what you want to open up. Because when I have some stuff, now last video we ended off, we had everything working, but I don't want you to type in a bunch of stuff. So this format now, basically for people that want to type along, you're going to use the start folder. You're going to go in there and I'm going to have some sample code in here. I've added a couple files. I'll show you in a second what they do. And then the people that don't want to type along, they just want to look at the finished solution, you can just go into the end folder, and that's where the finished solution is. So that's the way that all the videos you can see are going to be moving forward. So you definitely want to go ahead and sync that up. This is video 4, so you want to go ahead and use video 4's files. And I've got basically open here now. We have author and quote under model. And what we're going to do is build a quote system. And so we have authors of quotes. And when you select the author, we're basically going to show you all kinds of different quotes. To start out with, we're going to generate randomly which quote we want to show for each of our authors in our master view. In our detail view, when somebody selects one of the authors, we'll give you all the quotes for that. And that's going to be our basis of our basic app. So if we go through and look here, we got some Pico, plain old C# objects. The author, if we go look at author CS, you'll see that there's nothing special here. We got an int ID. We're kind of emulating the database in some sense here. We got a first, middle, and last name. We have a full name, which is just a string concatenation. Date of birth, date of death. We have a display date that we're using here to display those. Some birth cities and dates, and a picture URL heading. And then we have a factory. And a factory is a pattern that I really liked and used a long time ago back when I used to develop a lot more stuff in Java, which was well over 13 or 14 years ago now. But back then, the factories were really hot and really interesting ways of doing things. So this is a little factory. I don't have a database, and I could have put this stuff in JSON file and read it in through that way, but I felt this is just the fastest way I could do it. This is not best practices. Normally, you'd get this data from a web service somewhere or something like that, but I just hard-coded the data in this factory, so whenever I want authors, I can return all these authors. And that's how the author class works. If we look at the quote class, there's not much difference here. We got a quote, and the quote has both the author, which we just looked at that class, and then we have a text of the quote. And then, of course, once again, we have a factory, and the quotes factory goes through and gives us all the different quotes for a given author. So you can see here, I've got it hard-coded, so that case 1, which is Benjamin Franklin, I believe. These are all the quotes that Benjamin Franklin has made. And very easy. Author 2, we have all the quotes. Author 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And, once again, like I said, this would normally be in a database, and you'd use some kind of web API to bring this information up. But for our training session, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're just going to use these basic files that I've created for us. And then finally, the quotes repository. The repository pattern is a very interesting pattern, very modern way of encapsulating out your business logic away from your data access layer. Like, for example, if you're using a service, they'll go get this. We can kind of have our business layer, object layer encapsulated in here without having a bunch of business logic inside of our view models, because our view models, we may want several different view models based on, now, that's not as common, but a lot of times I'll have one view model and multiple views for it. I'll have a separate view in phone and a separate view in tablet. But, basically, this is a place where we can encapsulate that logic out, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not tied to just this Prism application. I could have that repository in a shared library, and I could have many different applications using that same repository, and that's very popular. For example, maybe you have a web page that's also using some of this business logic. So you don't want to have that just tied to your view models. You want to have that business logic in a shared location. Repository pattern is a pretty good pattern for doing that. So if you can see here, I've got a quotes repository, and in here I've got a private unsorted quotes. It's a list of quotes, and we can go see that I just go to the quotes factory and grab all those and keep them unsorted. I've got a couple of helper methods here. One of them is go get author by the ID. We'll see how I use that a little bit later. We also can go get all the quotes for a given author. We're going to use that in our details view. Very simple link statements here, nothing earth-shattering here. And like I said, what I'd like to do is on the main master view, I'd like to get random quotes, basically. I don't want to get like the first quote, because that would make our UI kind of boring. Every single time the person goes into it, they're just going to see the same quotes over and over again. So spice it up a little bit. I figured we'll just make a random option here for each author, so to go get a random quote from their list. And then by theory, not in this video, but in our video, we'll actually implement pull to refresh, so that if they pull to refresh, we'll get a new list of random quotes from each one of these authors. And I figured that would be a way to kind of neaten up this app a little bit. You can see here, once again, this is not anything that's earth-shattering, breaking, really complicated C# code here. Very simply just going through, figuring out how many quotes we have, getting a random number based on that, and then going to grab that element out of our list of unsorted quotes for that author at that random number index that we have. So very, very simple code here. We're not talking shattering here. And just real quickly to make sure that everything works great, we're going to go ahead and select our iPhone here, and I'm just going to go ahead and just run this real quick to make sure that our application still works. So let's go ahead and call up the simulator real quick here. It's a good idea, do a sanity check real quick here. Now, if you've downloaded this from the internet, you're going to have to go through and make sure that you've went and updated your package, restored your packages, your NuGet packages, because out of the box, probably not going to happen. So you can see here, here's our master page view. It's red. Nothing's changed from our last video. And if we go through here and take a look at the iPad Pro, we should get the same thing except we have our master detail inside of it. Now, of course, like I said, for you, if this is the first time you grab the source and stuff, you don't have the packages downloaded, you'd normally go in your solution and say restore NuGet packages. They should just come up restored. And then we can start rocking and rolling with this. So we can see here the iPad spinning up real quick. It does take a few seconds to switch between our simulators, but that should come up real quick, and we should be able to see our UI. Here we go, is our splash screen. You see here's our UI that we currently previously had. So let's start with some pretty basic one-on-one stuff to kind of help you out, make you feel a little bit more comfortable with this Prism and this view and view model setup that we have. So start with in Xamarin Studio, I don't know how much of you guys have used that or not. In Visual Studio, you can refactor stuff by renaming a file, and it'll ask you, hey, well, you want to rename all the stuff inside of there? And that's a really good way to refactor in classes. So for example, we're going to have a quote system, so I really don't want to call this master page view model a master page view model anymore. I really want to call that the quote page view model. Okay, so, does that make sense? Or excuse me, the quote master page. We'll call it that. That makes a little bit more sense. So I want to rename this, but I don't want to do a lot of work to rename this. So normally you could just rename the file, but that's not going to do enough for us here. Instead, we definitely want to rename in Xamarin Studio from the actual class definition up here. And when we do that, if we refactor rename here, it actually does a pretty good job about making sure that all the places that is, it gets renamed without issues. So as you can see here, I'm going to say rename this to quote master page view model. And you can see here, rename a file that contains the public class. So we're going to rename the file as part of this. So we don't have to do it at the rename in the file level. We're just going to do it here and this should change it. And that's pretty easy. You can see here that obviously in Get, I've made a change so that shows up blue. And if I go into Apps.cs, what we should see is that our, remember, this is where we map our views of view models. And if we take a look here, here's our quote, our master page view now maps to quote master page view model. So instantly our refactoring kind of worked. Now, what did not work is here. These are strings, and I want to bring this up. If we refactor any of these page view names, that's not going to go ahead. The refactoring process isn't going to fix these strings. In fact, we'll show that in a few seconds. We'll refactor a couple of these other things, and we'll go back and compile and see that it's busted. And so I just want to kind of get used to this so that you understand, like, what does it take to, as a developer, to go through and use this kind of stuff? Because this is the things that happen. You're going to end up having to refactor some stuff. It just happens inside of applications. So instead of being scared about it, we got to figure out and remember how all of our pieces fit together in our puzzle of making our application work, and making sure that when we do things like rename classes and stuff, that we do it in a way that's not going to damage our program. So I'm going to go here at detail, and I'm going to go and rename this guy also. And so let's go ahead and right click and say refactor and rename. And we're going to call this quote detailed page view model. And that seems like it makes sense here. So there we go. And we should now see that that's also renamed. So we've got a second class of renamed. This is going all pretty safe for us here. Now, we're going to rename our master detail page view model also to quote master page view model, because we're going to actually in the future use this. We're going to have other types of master detail pages. So we're going to do some other simulation stuff in future videos. So we kind of want to prepare ourselves that we're going to have more than just one of these. We're going to have many of these things. And that's kind of exciting. So let's go ahead and refactor this, and we're going to put just the word quote in front of it, and we're pretty much good there. So we've got the three classes that I wanted to rename quote to quote. So let's go ahead and compile. We want to do a sanity check real quick here and make sure that our application works again. I'm just going to keep on whatever simulator I currently have selected. I'm going to make the assumption that if the iPad works, that the phone's going to work. That it's not the greatest assumption in the world, to tell you the truth. But for the sake of time, I just want to make sure that that's happening. So you can see here, we've renamed our view models. And that's pretty easy, and that usually is always easy. It's really more of our XAML files and our C# files. That's when we start running into all kinds of problems. So let's start with the most basic one, our master page view. We can see here that we have a XAML and a C# file. And when we rename this, all kinds of bad stuff is going to start happening. So I'm going to actually rename this and say I want to do quote. And you can see rename the file that contains a public class. That seems like great. Now, you would think that you'd also rename the XAML file and fix all that stuff. It doesn't. Now, in Visual Studio, the refactoring or resharper is a lot better, and it does do that. But right now, I'm in Xamarin Studio, and so I have to pay the penalty of being in Xamarin Studio in the sense that the refactoring isn't as good as Visual Studio right now. So you can see here, I've got my quote master. I changed it over, but looky here. See the master page view? It hasn't changed the name, and it won't. So we're going to copy this. I just went ahead and hit the Apple key and then the C to copy, because we're going to have to modify the Zambo file by hand. And so the very first thing what I want to do is I'm just going to rename the Zambo file. So let's go here, and we've got that name already in the buffer. So I'm going to go ahead and click anywhere else, and that renamed it. So what I did, I know I did that really fast, but I just right-clicked and said rename. Not remove, rename, and then I copied or pasted in my file name that I took from my class name. Now the final thing we have to do here is in here, you can see here that we have, we're calling ourselves a quote master page view. Oh, okay, so that actually worked when we renamed. Now I don't remember this doing it earlier, but that looks like it actually worked. Is that we basically were looking to say, hey, you know, we are a quote master page view, so this is the class that we're calling from. And this is a good thing. So when we renamed it, it looks like it renamed it at least in here for us. So I think we're going to be okay. Let's compile quick one more time, just make sure that that's the case. So aha, we didn't, because look at here. If we look at our app configuration, we'll see that while we renamed it here, it did not automatically change it here. So we're going to have to go ahead and paste that name in of our new master. And now let's take a look here. By theory, we got the C# file, the C# code behind file. We should have to rename our XAML file, and then obviously we have to go in here and fix this. If you do these three things, that's all it should take in order to make all this stuff work. So let's go ahead and do it clean. And I just wanted to show you just how complicated this is. Now, what I'm seeing here, if you take a look here, some of our cut and paste, it kind of screwed it up our navigation, register type for navigation. So that's weird. I'm not sure what happened there, if that's a bug in Xamarin Studio, but I pasted it, changed part of the name of navigation, and that's not what it's supposed to do. So, but now I think we're going to work here because, like I said before, the three places we have to worry about is our C# code behind, our XAML file, and our class definition in there, and of course in our app CS, because that's where we map our view to view model. But nope, we can see here it did not work. And we're basically getting the root controller could not be created. So that means that something in our XAML file is broken. That almost every single time, that's what that means. So let's go through and make sure that you can see here, we know that we're not mapped together because this is coming up red. This means that the view model, or excuse me, the CS behind file and the XAML view file are not in sync anymore for some reason. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and make sure that we have all of our eggs in a row here. So we have a quote master view, page view, and we have this here. So let's take a look here. We're in the views, so we want to make sure our namespace matches. Let's copy this out. Right click and see what quick fix says. Quick fix says nothing. So that's not good. Let's go in here and take a look and make sure that we can do this and that's right. So that seems like it's right. It seems like our title's right. It seems like nothing's wrong here per se. We're telling it to look in Prism forums for the Prism namespace. All this looks right, but yet we're still, let's go ahead and try again. Clean. I'm going to go ahead and just right click and say clean on our project. This is the reason why I wanted to do this in this particular video, is show you just the fact that you could do this, but it is a little tricky. You have to watch out for how you're renaming stuff in your XAML to make sure everything's going to work. So we're still not working. Let me show you how I would normally debug this then. So, well, one, we can see here the initialized component's still not working. And that's a bad sign. That means that, something's broken between our XAML and our C# code behind file, so that these two things are not connected together for some reason or another. And if we take a look here, this seems like it's fine, and this seems like it's fine because we're saying go find the class here. We're setting the title here. We can change the title, but that ain't going to make a difference because that's just a string that we're setting. So in fact, we should be binding that from our view model long term. But short term, this should be fine. And we're saying class, and here views, quote master, page view. That seems fine. And if we go in here, we have a partial class for this. This all looks fine. Let's do this real quick. Let's go ahead and just close our solution and reopen it real quick. I'm going to save, and I'm going to go ahead and reopen that back up. And take a look here and see if this should be the right one. And we can see here, this is not the right one. This is a totally different one because this is everything's done. So let's close this out. Go look for our other one. This is the right one. So you can see here, notice that I'm not getting the red squiggly line anymore. So that's pretty interesting. I wonder if Xamarin Studio is just kind of freaking out on me a little bit here. And just not working 100% right. This happens to me from time to time where Xamarin Studio just plays dead on me, but that's not the case here. We're still having a disconnect between our initialized component stuff here. So let's do a try catch here and see what's going on. So this is so my answer to any time I'm trying to debug a XAML file that's not working is the file and pattern, which, like I said, once again, the reason I wanted to create this video was to kind of go through and explain how you can go through and debug some of this stuff. So what we're going to do is we need to use system here, so let's just do using system that diagnostics. And let's get diagnostics going here, and that should get us a quick fix. And then let's use, we got system and system diagnostics, and then let's go ahead and just debug right line. We'll do a string, new C#6 string stuff, and we can do ex dot message, and then we'll do bad typing tonight, and then we'll do a space, and then we'll do a stack trace here. Stack traces are actually in mono are a performance hinderer. You definitely want to keep away from doing these as little as possible. Obviously, since we're crashing, it's okay, but it turns out that to recursively look that up it's pretty expensive and not 100% recommended. So let's see what we can figure out what's really going on here. Once again, like I said, I did this on purpose. I have this working, but I want to go through, and as you saw, I had an end solution where everything was working right. I want to kind of go through and explain how to debug some of this stuff. This is just in case you run into it. So you see here, we never even made it to our breakpoint here, which means that at that point in time, then we're not even making it past navigation, which is the problem. Think about it here for a second, folks. What did we do? We changed out the name of our page. Remember how I told you earlier that when you change the name of the page, it won't change it here because these are strings? So we no longer have master detail page view, or excuse me, we no longer have the our page called master page view. It's now called quote master page view. So that means inside of our master detail page view, that is busted. So let's go look at our master detail page view, and we should be able to see it right here. And that's our problem. See this local reference here? We're referencing master page view. That doesn't exist anymore. It's now called quote master page view. So let's go ahead and go here again and here, and that should fix it. Remember, our master page view basically has a master detail page, and our master detail page has both a master and a detail. We manually define the master via this definition right here, like we did last time, and here's our class definition, or excuse me, where's local at? Right here's our definition to say, hey, inside of this assembly, this particular file exists. And the detail we get via navigation. So let's go ahead and save that and go look at our app here. So basically, we get master from here, and then we're making the base navigation page view. And then right here is the detail page view. This is where we tell detail to actually go over here. Of course, we make a navigation page first so that we get our navigation controller. We get our navigation toolbar at the top, or action bar in Android, however you want to talk about that. But now let's go ahead and debug and see if we work. By theory, we fixed our issue at hand, which was we renamed the master page view, but we didn't go into the master detail page and tell it that there was a new page. And you can see here that we're not crashing anymore. So we fixed that part. So we're halfway done with our refactoring project here to start our little lesson. And I may split this up into a couple different videos because I don't want these to be like 50 minutes a piece. That's really hard to kind of watch. So let's go ahead and see if we can finish this refactoring. I think I'll stop this video, and then we'll do video 5 of the actual event stuff. Both of them should get uploaded right around the same time because I've got the solutions already done for both these. So let's take a look here. We've got our master done. So let's go ahead and do our detail. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to find our class, go open that guy and or gal, and say, hey, we want to name this quote detail page view. And that should do that there. We should be able to save that. And now we have to also rename our Zambo file here. So it's rename, put a quote in front of it. And that should get our quote. Let's go ahead and just double check that to make sure our class name got changed. And it did here. We can see here's our class. That looks pretty nifty. Let's go ahead and go back to our routing here. We can see here that this is going to be busted because we did not switch it here. Also, we need to make sure that it switched here, which it did. See, here's our view model to view mapping. So we're pretty good there. We just need to switch it here in our manual string. Quote, detail page view. And then here, we also need to change it here for phone. We've only been testing on tablet, so we didn't realize that this would also be a problem. So, these are our manual string-based routing. When we rename views and views models, none of our navigation stuff is going to know that. And so anywhere you have it manually hard-coded, you have to start thinking about that, going, oh, okay, I need to fix that there also. And there's other ways we could do this. We could actually have our name of our classes. Maybe we have those in a constant C# file, like a helper file that we use to bring these so we don't have to hard code these in right here. That's probably the better way of doing this long term. But for short term, this is just a training video. We're going to be okay with this. So let's go ahead and run one more time here. We should, by theory, have our detail now fixed because our detail comes from routing. We fixed it in the 3 spots, renamed our C# code behind, renamed our XAML file, and then we went into any of the routing that we have and made sure that we fixed it there. And of course, we're back up and running now. So we were able to rename our master and detail without a lot of work here. The final thing we do want to rename, however, is our master detail page view. And remember, that's the manager guy. That's the guy only in tablet that goes through and makes it so that our split view works, our master detail split. Where the master page view is basically just nothing more than the first page that comes up in a phone or the left page in our master detail. And of course, in detail view, that's the right page on tablet, the right panel. And then on phone, that'd be if you clicked and you drilled in, that would be the page that shows up. So this manages it on tablet, and this is this guy right here. We want to also call that quote because we're going to have multiple of these in the future. So let's go ahead and, we don't want to remove, which is right next to rename. Not necessarily the best place to put those. Mr. Microsoft, recommend getting these menus looking more like Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and open up our class actually and rename it there instead. Refactor, rename. And that's what I recommend doing for the CS side of things, for your class side of things. But your XAML files, I recommend renaming via your XAML. Now, of course, we saved it here, but this is broken because we haven't renamed our XAML yet. So let's go ahead and close this out and save. That's great. And then let's go ahead and rename it here by renaming the XAML file by the file name. Add in the word quote. And let's just double check and make sure that we look in our class definition and make sure that our class definition was updated. And this, it was not. So that's pretty interesting. And I'm not sure if that's a bug but we basically renamed the file here, but it did not rename the class name. So let's go ahead and make sure that our class name right here is renamed. And it is. So that's going to be our disconnect. So let's go ahead and manually rename it here. And that should be right. And that should be right. Let's go ahead and save this. And now look at our code behind, and we no longer have the red squiggly line. That's a good sign. No red squiggly lines is usually a pretty good sign for us. So let's close this out. Probably not going to need that anymore. And we just need to add the word quote in front of right here because this is where we're calling our quote master detail view, page view basically now, instead of before where we were calling just master. We renamed that. So if we kind of take a look here in a summary, we've renamed our master detail page, we've renamed our master page, and then our detail page. And this kind of makes a little bit more sense now because we're using quotes and we've got a better idea what's going on here. Let's go ahead and just hit run real quick, make sure that we're working. We'll run it one more time on phone to make sure we're working. And what we've basically done now is refactored by renaming all of our files to quote. And this is a good lesson on how to do that. So we can see here all of our stuff still working. Now, once again, the one thing I didn't do is I didn't rename all the views to pull the title from the view model, which is something we should probably be doing. It means that we can test our binding better here. So if you remember, right, we have this base view model, and we should probably just fix this right now while we're at it before we end this video. And titles should come from our base view model. So is this our base view model here? It sure is. So let's see here. We don't have a property for a title, so let's add it. Let's make it so we can map to that. So let's add a property here. We'll call this title. So it's a public string title. Or excuse me, let's do private first. No, we'll do public. Private string title. There's our private variable. And now we just need a public version of that to map to. Get will return title. And I'll show you also that there is a keyboard shortcut for this. It doesn't always work right for me, but there is a keyboard shortcut so you don't have to type all this by hand. All right, so there's title. We have our title there. And let's just set title by default. If nothing gets set to title equals string.empty. I always feel better when I set stuff to default values. Just a personality flaw of mine. So in our view, our base view model, we're basically saying that everybody can have a title. And that way, no matter what, we'll always have a title. And what we do is on each page, each one of our view models, we can just now set a title. So this is our detail, our quote detail page. So let's go ahead and just say this is our, this will be, our detail page is going to be used for our author quotes, basically. So we're going to select an author, and our author quotes will show up here. So let's just call this title equals author quotes. In fact, let's do something pretty interesting. We'll make it, we'll fix that later. We'll fix it when we get a messaging system here. We'll change the title. We'll use a message to change the title so we can send the author's name over part of our message. We'll do it that way. For right now, we'll just call this author quotes, and I think that that'll be good enough for us. And let's save that. And then I think what we'll do is we'll kind of ninja that part of our events and messaging lesson that we want to kind of do here to kind of show that off. So let's, I just want to have something in place to show off binding and make sure that that's working. So here, this is just going to be our quotes. So we have quotes and author quotes. our master page view is going to show us that. And so all we have to do to make these work now is go into first our master page view and see where we see title here. We're going to delete that. We're going to do a binding to our view model. So we can do this because of the magic of Prism, and we're just going to bind to our view model's title. Now, how does that work? Well, right here, this is the big thing. The Prism view model locator, auto wire view model, means that we're going to wire up our view model. Now, the binding context kicks in, and anytime we want to bind, it's going to go to the binding context, which is our view model. It's going to look for this property, whatever we say to bind to. And you can see here, it's a title. So we're just going to say we're bind title to title. That's a string, so that's going to work. And whatever is in that property's title, that's what we're going to bring back and show in the UI. So the same thing here with go detail, the quote detail page view. Let's just go here, and we'll change this also to our binding, the new title binding that we did. And we can see here that we also have a label here that just says detail page view. We could also switch that out to bind to our title. So that way we have that there also. So let's do that there. Quick save. Let's go ahead and run this real quick. And then we're running on phone once again, make sure that our bindings work. We'll close this video out and we'll start the next one up, and we'll talk about events in greater detail. So see what happens here. We should hopefully get our titles. That's going really slow. That's usually a bad sign that we're going slow. We went from like starting almost instantaneously to really slow. This could be also Xamarin Studio just being a pain in our butt here. Let's see here. We've got our binding to title, our binding to title. Both those are syntax seem like they're right. Let's go ahead and check master real quick here. Make sure that we got our binding right there too. That seems like it's right. We really didn't do anything else. Go to our base view model, make sure we get title. That seems right. And then let's go ahead and go to our page. Make sure quote's set there. And let's also make sure that it's set here for our title. So both those are set. Let's do a clean real quick. Could just be as simple as needing to do a clean. Oh, and now I think about it, I know there's another thing that could possibly be killing us, which I was going to bring up when I was coding these. Obviously, I code the finish and then I go back and record a video based on that. Is that fast compiling turned on in iOS can cause all kinds of crazy chaos. And so I don't recommend having that turned on unless you delete the program from your simulator. And I'll show you what that means in a second here. We're still not working. It should be faster than this. Let's go ahead and stop debugging real quick here and take a look and see what I mean here. So see these programs, I'm going to delete both these. So if you have fast compiling turned on, it makes the assumption that all you want to change is the code that's changed, and that's all it pushes up. Well, what does that mean? I'll show you what I'm talking about here. If we go into the iOS project, which is down here at the bottom, our iOS training project, go to options, and if we go to build, there's an option when you debug to enable incremental builds. What these incremental builds are designed where it's basically not going to compile everything. It's only going to compile the stuff that's changed, and then it makes the assumption everything else out there is great. Now, this can cause all kinds of bugs if you don't delete the application. It just does not push out that well. In fact, sometimes if I'm having some really weird stuff going on with the simulator, I'll just disable both the enabled device-specific builds and the incremental builds both, because that tends to sometimes fix the problems. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and re-push this back out and see if this works. If not, we'll have to troubleshoot this a little bit further and see if we take our bindings if it fixes it. Or we'll actually, the next thing to do is just close Xamarin Studio and see if that fixes it. It could just be the Xamarin Studio is having a problem connected to the debugger, which is another known defect in Xamarin Studio that can happen from time to time. Yeah, see, this is taking way too long. It should not take this long to launch. So let's go ahead and just do this. Close Xamarin Studio real quick. Yeah, see the Reading spinning beach ball of death. That's usually a sign that Xamarin Studio is just not having a great day today. Yeah, that's not good. So it's we'll also delete this real quick. Just make sure we have a clean simulator. Open Apple Shift H is what allows you to actually go to the home screen. As you see there, I can tap that twice real quick. It's equivalent of double tapping your home button on your phone. So that's a good tip here. So let's reload back up our solution here and try to debug one more time. So let's go ahead and go here. And we'll get the simulator open here. See if we can get our application here to debug real quick and see our bindings. And at that point in time, we'll call it a day. And there we go. So that's all it was. I just closed Xamarin Studio, reopened it back up, and everything's working now. As you can see here, we have author quotes over here, and then we have quotes right here. That's what we named that page. I didn't change the text in here to the binding, so that's a known issue. So if we step that out, and let me show you what I meant by that. So you can hold down the mouse, and that's equivalent to hold down your finger, and then you can click the little X to remove the program. And then when you want to get out of the shaking mode here, you just hit Open Apple Shift H. And that will get you out of shaking mode. It's the equivalent of hitting the home button. It's a good tip. The simulator obviously has in here, if you go look here, they usually show you the keyboard shortcuts. So if we go home here, you can see that's Shift key, Open Apple H, and then lock, of course, is Open Apple L. You can see all these different keyboard shortcuts are really great if you're using the simulator a lot. So we could go through and fix that one last thing that I showed you with the master page not having the text in it changed. And we'd have to go into our views for that. So let's go ahead and go to master page view here and just take a look at that code here. You can see here, this is manually typed in. And if we wanted to change that code, we can just go binding, and then we want to say bind to title. And in fact, let's check this on phone because we've checked on tablet all along. Let's make sure our phone stuff still works, through all this more that we've been doing and stuff that we haven't broken our phone build somehow. And that's important when you're doing both tablet and phone, as you constantly check these. The routing is different between them. And if you start doing custom view models for your phone versus tablet, that's another reason why you definitely need to be checking this and check it often. If you're in an agile shop, I highly recommend taking separate stories for phone versus tablet because there's little tiny tweaks that you're going to have to be able to do here and there. You can see here we're in the quotes view, which is our master view, and now that text has changed on phones. So I think we're good to go here. I think we have a good start to getting ourselves up and running with showing off some event stuff. So I'm going to end this video here. We just did some refactoring to show how to refactor and show how to troubleshoot what happens when you rename your views or your view models, and some stuff to watch out for when that happens. So thanks and have a great one. We'll see you in the next video.